Welcome to Gospel Legacy in New York City, a podcast created by City to City, New York City.
Today, in the midst of the city's challenges, the gospel still brings light to dark places, healing to broken lives, and unity to divided communities.
We are your hosts. I'm Kristian Hernandez.
And I'm Jennifer Chan.
Welcome, everyone. We were excited to explore the Chelsea neighborhood, a tucked away, almost small town area on the west side of Manhattan, extending from 14th to 30th Street between the Hudson River and 6th Avenue. Our guest, David Plant, church planter and pastor of Storefront Church, shares his admiration for this lively community of 40,000 residents, renowned for its 200-plus art galleries and its rich history, from its industrial origins in the 19th century to its current highlights such as Chelsea Market, Chelsea Piers, and the High Line. Let's hear from David about what makes Chelsea truly special.
Chelsea has changed radically in the last 15 years, but what we have presently, and when I think of Chelsea, really I'm thinking of West Chelsea, and that would be from 13th Street to 39th, 8th Avenue to the water. So this little pocket alongside of the west side of Manhattan. But my elevator pitch would be within those 15 square blocks or so, really is a microcosm of the whole city. So it is if you walk through it, you might have a hard time trying to pinpoint, like, what is this neighborhood here? There's areas that feel very small town. And yet Google's headquarters are there. Twitter's or X's headquarters are there. There's, some of the most famous galleries in the world are there, which means we can walk into these neighborhoods and see, Picasso's and modern artists that, they're so it's an interesting neighborhood in that sense. It also is bookended by NYCHA housing projects. And so we've seen this tremendous change, a lot of hyper-gentrification because of the High Line. But this neighborhood is really truly diverse, socioeconomically, ethnically, gender, sexuality. It's always been, or I would say since the 70s or 80s, has been the home for the gay community in New York. That's changing. But yeah, I mean, if you were to come into this neighborhood, it holds all the things that New York City holds within about 15 blocks. It's a beautiful neighborhood. I think by and large, it's New York City, so we don't give up compliments too quickly. And we've got opinions as New Yorkers, but I think by and large, people love living in that neighborhood. And I think old, young, life in New York City is tough, but people are grateful to live in that neighborhood. And it doesn't matter what your socioeconomic status is. Like, they love Chelsea. They're proud of that, being able to live there.
So, David, let's get a little bit into your church planting journey.
Sure.
Church planting is a crazy thing to do.
Yeah.
You and your wife, Susan, have given your life to bless and serve this community. What inspired you? How did you get started in this?
Yeah, I think journey is really the right term. I was blessed in that when I came to faith, I immediately started attending this church that church planting was a part of the culture. And so it was in many conversations. I was around church planters. I heard church planting stories. I met church planters from all over the world. And so church planting for me, the journey began with really discipleship, that church planting is a normative outworking of the gospel. It's an appropriate, healthy, biblical response to the gospel. And so for me to see that, it just, that was just the culture of the church. And so I tied those two things together. This is what many Christians do. It's not the only thing Christians do, but it's right. And we should be thinking about that. And healthy churches should be actually perpetuating themselves. And so that was one part. Years later, that church was Redeemer Presbyterian Church, and Tim was the pastor at the time. And years later, he cast a vision that was pretty compelling for many of us. And I think when I heard this vision of planting lots of churches in New York City within a relatively short period of time, I I never wanted to leave New York, but I knew that vision was going to be my life's work.
Wow.
I didn't know in what capacity. I didn't know I'd plant a church, but I thought, well, that's what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. And my wife felt that way too, and many of us felt that way too. We love living in the city. We haven't really felt like we would ever live anywhere else, but that was really kind of confirmed. Like, okay, here's the path. And we began to just pray about what does that mean for us as a couple, as a family. And over time, the reality of maybe planting became more tangible. A friend of mine outside of the city asked if I would consider planting a church out in Long Island. And so, you're trying to be faithful and you're like, all right, if that's, I'll lean into that a little bit. But what that meant was we needed to be assessed. So through our denomination, we went and were assessed, and we were kind of going down believing that would be checked off and we would not have to think about church planting anymore. Okay. Like, you're not fit to church plant. Maybe, is your marriage strong enough to withstand church planting? And so we went down there and we did really well in this assessment. And they actually said, not only do we think you should church plant, but you should plant in the city. And so once we went through that kind of experience, and we knew from afar some of those assessors, and, we walked away feeling like we're not going to be able to put this down. Wow. It was pretty alive in us. And so that was, so there was the church culture. There was that vision that was cast. And then I think thirdly, a community came around us and said, we want to do this with you. And so a good friend, and some of you know Chantal Kim, she came and she works in organizational development and she's very gifted. And she just said, hey, I want to plant this church with you. And so she worked for 4 years with us. And, the three of us got this thing off the ground. And so those three things, the culture and that vision, and then the community, that's sort of the journey. And that's how we got here.
Well,
so right now as a church, where are we? We have been worshiping together for 2 years. We met online for 2 years, or 18 months. We have elders and deacons now. We have about 60 members in our church. We had 105 people on Sunday. Wow. And, the work's hard. And it's good. It's really good. But that's where we're at.
As David describes his church planting journey, I was curious to know more about his decision to plant a church in the city versus in Long Island. He mentioned being encouraged by a supportive community, processing with them the possibility of planting a church outside the city, but that they were ultimately affirmed in their calling to plant within Center City. I asked David to reflect further on the key ingredients or qualities that he believed contributed to a flourishing church plant in the city.
I was also struck by David's journey and his humility and openness to share transparently. Listen as David admits the challenges he faced despite having a clear calling and thriving church. His acknowledgement of the difficulties that he and his wife faced amid undeniable signs of God's work is noteworthy and sobering. I wanted to hear more, so I asked him to elaborate on some of the challenges they encountered, especially considering their strong sense of calling, positive assessment, and the development of a beautiful community even during the pandemic.
Answer is my lack of belief. My own understanding of the gospel and really applying it every day into my life to motivate, to inspire, to bring me peace, all that kind of stuff. That's always like the challenge, right? That's like the foundational answer, the foundational reality. I think some of the challenges for us is between being missional in the community and missional in the church.
Interesting.
And so we have a 7-day community center called Neighbor. It's in the bottom of our apartment building, and we occupy that as a church, but it's really a space that we give to the neighbors. So New Yorkers crave square footage. We don't have any. And so that's a real offer, and that's a real gift to the community. Wow. And so there's all kinds of things that happen in there, community boards and grief groups and wow. climate conversations that we're not really involved in. We basically meet these people, give them the key, and provide a comfortable space for them to do that. So it's missional in the sense we're forming relationships and partnerships. We're trying to further their own gifts in the neighborhood to bless the neighborhood. That's like that takes a lot of time and energy. It takes a ton of time and energy. And so we basically have like 2 nonprofits.
Yeah.
With no staff. And so it's, there is like, well, what about us over here?
Sure.
You're the pastor of our church. And so we need, so it's just a balancing act. That's a real tension. And there's many opportunities where we just have failed in doing that. And so right now we've just brought somebody on, and this person I hope is I believe is going to really help us pastor our church really well. But the tension between being missionally engaged in the community and then really caring for our people. I think also, I think if somebody were to just come into our neighborhood, they just see this as like this hotbed of cultural issues. Race issues, poverty issues, wealth issues, sexuality, gender issues. And I think it could really be intimidating.
Yeah.
I think if you're too involved in the social media world, you could just fall into that same sort of pattern of communication. But I think for us, we're realizing that this is our neighborhood. This is not a parachute plant. I think if I were to daydream about things that could happen as a pastor in our church or in our community and conversations we have, I could really be paralyzed by it.
Sure.
But I think we've lived there long enough, and we have, I think, just being present in the community, people are not really prone to talk about the hot button issues in their life. Each and every day. They really want to talk about the things that anybody wants to talk about. How are you doing? What's life like? This is what I'm struggling with. Do you care about that kind of thing? Our space is called Neighbor. And I think that really meets people exactly where they're at. It's good for me as a Christian because I'm called to love my neighbor. So it's just a more creative way to expand my faith and my understanding of what it means to be faithful. And I don't need to proselytize every day to somebody to love them well or to be faithful to God. And so we're there for the long haul. It's a marathon. And, there's lots of days I don't want to get up and go down in that store and put the dog bowl out. We don't even have a dog. And I'm like, what am I doing with my life? But there's something about the incarnation that melts the heart, right? Like God came in the flesh. And for us to come in the flesh, we're saying something about our love for those people. And especially at a time where people are wondering, should I stay or go? But there's something about being an actual presence in the neighborhood that you cannot ignore.
You mentioned a phrase. You said, we're not a parachute church plant. And that's always been a funny image to me. But it really does convey what a lot of church planting experiences are in New York City, where many church planters, without much context in the neighborhood, some didn't even live there much time before they were trying to plant the church, kind of just dropped in like a parachute, and then go start a service, go start a gathering. But what I'm hearing in your story is like, it's not a typical church planting story in that like, this was your neighborhood first. This was your home first.
For almost 20 years.
That's what's staggering. That's not a typical story. For almost 20 years. And so it sounds to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, but like there's almost like a guarding of the neighborhood that comes out of your heart. It's almost like we don't want our church to hurt the neighborhood because you love the neighborhood. Like you live there.
That's right.
And so, but that must be an interesting dynamic to live in a place for 20 years and then we're going to start a church here. And so like, how has that kind of shaped your soul, your family life, and your perspective on church planting, because that's not the typical story.
Yeah, it's good for the soul. It's good for the soul. We can hide a lot as Christians in the city, but I can't really hide anymore in my neighborhood.
No, you can't.
Maybe people get the wrong impression. Maybe they think I'm a do-gooder, that kind of thing. But everybody who comes into that space knows I'm a pastor. And that's really great. I'm sort of in awe of some of the things that take place, like any church planter would be. But I'm also very aware of those neighbors that I don't have relationships with.
Right.
We do this, we teach this class on what it is to be, what does it look like to be a good neighbor in the city? And we do that with our neighbors. It's based on the Good Samaritan parable. And that's like a cohort that we have that comes out of the relationships we build through neighbor. And so these people are doing amazing things. And we just want to learn from them and want to share like where we're coming from. And so in one of the exercises that we do, we have this tic-tac-toe grid, and we say, name the people that you speak with most during the week. They all fill it up. Then we say, remove family.
Oh, wow.
Remove people from work. And we would, who lives in your building? And by the time, these are like really social people who are committed to the neighborhood. They can't name 2 people who live on their floor, and I'm one of those people too, right? Like, or I was. And so that's like, I guess I say all that to say our own inability to be good neighbors is just laid bare every day.
Wow.
It's really hard, it's really hard to, put others before yourself and all that kind of stuff. And yet it's not that hard. If you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So let's go back to the parachute model. That works for some people.
Yeah.
My fear with that, or my challenge with that, is if I were to do something like that, that means I have to be a public intellectual. I've got to be like an incredible draw as a speaker. That's just not my gifts. And I think we actually probably do a disservice, or maybe we have the wrong impression that to plant a church well, that you have to be doing podcasts on a regular basis, and you've got to know the culture, to teach at a college level or something like that. And I think all that stuff is super important, obviously, but your presence and our presence in people's lives, it just. Most of the things you learn in seminary, you're not going to talk with Betty, who's lived in our neighborhood for 70 years. But we help her with, her taxes, and we help her with her, getting herself organized. And, those are the kinds of things I think where you live in a neighborhood are just more readily available.
Man, David, what you just shared makes me think in our city-to-city training world, we try to challenge people with the question of, if your church plant was to disappear tomorrow, would you be missed? And I think Betty, who you help with her taxes, would miss y'all.
That's right.
And we give thanks to God for that.
Amen.
It's beautiful.
Amen. And that is, and I'm going to quote the great philosopher Tom Brady. And my friends are like, would you stop talking about that interview? And I am a huge sports fan, but I don't really talk about sports openly like that. But he said his number one principle for leadership is caring. He cares about the people that he's working with. And I think that's a part of our church makeup. And I think that's a part of like neighbor. Like, we just care. And they're not going to miss you if you don't miss them.
Yeah.
So anybody can do. There's so many great organizations doing the practical work to care for people.
Man.
But if you don't miss them, they're really not going to miss you.
I was deeply impacted by the profound idea shared by David. This importance of being a good neighbor as the foundation of church planting. When he emphasized that if you don't miss your neighbors, they won't miss you. The suggestion is that a crucial measure of a church's impact is its genuine connection with the community. honestly believe that David's approach to ministry is a departure from traditional church planting strategies that tend to focus on public intellectualism and great speaking skills.
Yeah, that line, if you don't miss your neighbors, they won't miss you, is inspired by a posture which encourages inclusivity and love for the community, inviting more people to participate in God's mission.
It's a simple yet profound idea that could transform church planting by prioritizing being a good neighbor, perhaps over other, more typical or practical skills.
Exactly, and that prompted me to ask David about their church planting team. Earlier in the interview, he had mentioned working with a volunteer who eventually became a staff member, Chantal Kim. Listen as he highlights that church planting is best seen and experienced as a collaborative effort rather than a solo endeavor. He shares more about the team around him and how they've worked together to build a vibrant community.
Yeah, so Chantal was with us for 4 years, and she was every bit as called as we were, as I was. Maybe not officially, but it showed in faith and practice. She worked with us for 2 years for free, and she had a pretty robust full-time job already. Then she came on staff and worked another 2 years. She rolled off in the spring, and she did such a great job. We actually didn't even... we felt her personal absence, but it wasn't until maybe 6-7 months later that we started to say, oh, we got to shore up some of these things. Wow. And so we ended up bringing on somebody to take us into the future. But one of the things that she helped us do was get our elders and deacons trained and installed.
Wow.
And so when I think about our leadership, Susan and I, we don't feel like we're alone. Like, I work for these guys now. I work for these officers, these men and women. And so we don't feel like we're alone, and they're really grabbing the reins. And so these are people that have been with us since the beginning, and some I've known since, for a long, long time. And so they've really grabbed hold of this church and in a really healthy way made it their own. So that's super helpful. They care for me far more than I deserve. Like, that's one of the big surprises of being in ministry and being in a church plant, is just how much people give to, not only to the church, but they just love their pastor really well. And they fight for us, they protect us, and not like we're under siege, but they know the demands and they create space for us, and they just bless us, they look after us. And so that's maybe not completely your question, but right now we have 3 part-time roles. Our ED is a part-time role. We have a music director who's part-time, and then we have somebody who works 5 hours, and she oversees our neighborhood groups and does some curriculum with us. They're all excellent. They could be at any church. They're great. And so, that would be our team. So right now we have elders and deacons. They're really grabbing the reins of the church, and they're really responsible in that. Chantal helped all of that. We have a part-time ED, a part-time music director, a 5-hour neighborhood group person. But really, because of our model with Neighbor, we're a very volunteer-oriented church. So everybody knows if you're a part of this, then you're going to be, rolling your sleeves up and getting dirty, so to speak. And people really do. People really do. Presently, our main PowerPoint slide deck person on Sunday morning is a former managing director at Goldman Sachs, who's now semi-retired. But, this is somebody who can handle a lot more responsibility than that. And this man is faithful. He's also our chief baker on Sunday morning.
Wow. It's a skill set.
So people are actually really leaning into spaces that I wouldn't have thought possible, or I wouldn't have seen them there, but they jump in and do it. So the volunteer culture is really important.
Yeah, so glad to hear that.
One of the things that struck me about some parts of your story that I'm aware of, and I want to dig in a little bit more, is the timing of when you went public with your church. And so like for listeners, they're hearing, oh, wow, this church sounds amazing. This guy's been living there for 20 years and kind of they dug in deep as a family. And yeah, it kind of led to this journey of a church that's, it's gathered and thriving. They're in the neighborhood. But you guys decided through God's leading to start your church at a very interesting time. Tell us about that. And what was that like?
Yeah. So because I have prophetic gifts, we launched it in 2020 in March. When the pandemic hit, there were needs and there were questions and we were around. And so, you do the community engagement cohort at City to City, and you learn like about mapping your neighborhood and doing prayer walks and knowing who are the resources in your neighborhood. And we've done all that kind of stuff. And then the pandemic hit, and we got to take advantage of our homework. Like we were kind of prepared.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I had lived across the street from Fulton Housing Project for a while. And we'd had some friends there because our children went to the same school together, but it was fairly surface in our relationships. During the pandemic, though, we started serving pretty regularly over there, 3-4 times a week.
Wow.
And it would be me and some people from our church, or just me and Susan, or me and my son. And those relationships really began to take off. So I became very good friends with the Tenant Association leadership. They asked me to begin to pray before their meetings.
Oh, wow.
And because there's a lot of volatility in the community because of some political things happening, those were always like really raucous meetings.
Really?
And a lot of swearing at each other and not at all like a presbytery meeting. But I would pray, and sometimes I would get cussed out after.
Wow.
And it wasn't because they didn't believe in God. It's because they thought it was a shill for the leadership.
Oh, wow.
And so, but those kinds of things have a way of working themselves out. And, the person who cussed me out, I delivered food to them like 3 or 4 days later.
Man.
That's just providence, right? And so over time, I was asked to lead a Bible study there. And I started leading this Bible study in NYCHA projects in the tenant office, and 10, 12 people would come.
Oh my gosh.
And now that group now meets at Neighbor. And so we've been doing that for probably coming on 2 years now. And that our storefront community group, we need to be a little more regular with it, but there's a period where we were meeting, I think, once a month together with this NYCHA group.
Wow. I want to ask David, what has been most surprising over the last few years?
I'm surprised at how many Christians live in my neighborhood. People who maybe don't go to church, but they're believers. And for some reason, in their story, they're disconnected from a church, but they read and they pray, and their faith looks a little different than mine, but they know the Lord. And so I think there's something to be said of standing, standing in the gap or being incarnational, that it really does draw people who are longing to be a part of a church community, but have not, for whatever reason, haven't taken that next step or haven't come back. And so I'm surprised to see how many there are out there. It's just evident that God is at work in this neighborhood. And we shouldn't be that surprised in this sense. My neighborhood has 5 or 6 beautiful churches in this neighborhood. And that's because God has been at work in this neighborhood for a long time. They may not be filled anymore, but he's been at work in this neighborhood, and he's going to be at work way after we leave. And I think, maybe just it's helpful to have a humble perspective on all of this. We get to be faithful and obedient and live into this adventure, but with no delusions about how long my church is going to be around, how long I'm going to be around. So that's not the surprise question, but But I guess it does allude to, being surprised at how much God is at work in our community already.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
I'm really moved by your story, David, because as you described, like the surprises of discovering that there's been way more believers living in your neighborhood than you would have realized unless you said yes to this journey to plant the church. And you agreed with that wording. You're like, it's been a journey. But it seems as if like God has been throwing this party in Chelsea for a long time. And then you guys kind of showed up kind of like late to the party and realizing, oh, this has been going on for a while. And so like, what have been some of the things in your journey that have kind of felt like that, where like we had no idea that God was just waiting for us to say yes, because now that we said yes, now we're backing into these open doors and these amazing moments of favor that we couldn't have conjured up if we tried.
I think when we started looking for a space, we had a lot of rejection. We were looking for a neighborhood retail space. And, we didn't to articulate. Yeah.
Why were you rejected?
I think because we were a church, and in that neighborhood, people were looking for a Starbucks. They're looking for a bank. They're looking for something that's going to raise the property value. And as we're talking about, we're going to be a community center, and we're going to care for people, and they're like, yeah, I'm not sure I want you guys around. I think they had a hard time wrapping their head around what we were trying to do.
Sure.
And we were too. I think they probably felt like we might be a soup kitchen. We might, all of a sudden have homeless people lining the block when they're trying to have, make some money and honor their other tenants. And so that was hard. But it was helpful because by the end of the pandemic, the prices were really low in our neighborhood. And so the space that we rent is a prime location, which we never could have afforded, 18 months earlier. So we pay like 3 times less than what it was originally going for.
Wow.
And it's in our building, and that's super convenient too, and gives us a lot of credibility with people. When they come in, they're like, what's this about? And I say, well, I'm a pastor, and we give the space away, and I live upstairs. And all of a sudden they're like, oh, okay, then you're not some interloper.
Yeah.
And there is a lot of interlopers in our neighborhood. Yeah, that's another conversation. But I think when we started, we outgrew our model. And so we needed to look for a Sunday worship space.
Okay.
And we went around to the churches and interviewed, and, there's some good opportunities there, but they were fairly limiting. And we had like little windows here or there. Somebody gave me a number for a school in our neighborhood, which is a very nice new school. It's on the High Line. And I knew right away we couldn't afford that space. And they'd had some challenges on their own planting this posh school right across the street from NYCHA Housing. And so we were a little bit uncertain, is this kind of a lightning rod institution? And but anyway, I ended up calling the guy, and I had a very sort of stereotypical New York conversation with this man who I didn't know who he was, but I said, hey, we're a church plant. We're a neighborhood church. We're looking for a space. Do you guys have one? And he was like, you're what? You're Christians? And he's like, all right, I'll call you in a couple days. And he was an older man, just like quintessential New York businessman. And then he called us in a couple days, and I thought I'd never hear from him again, but he ends up owning this building.
Oh, wow.
And he said, we want to work this out. We want to make this happen. And so ended up, we went into the school, and they were just so gracious to us and generous to us. And they ended up opening the building for us on Sundays. And they're bringing in other organizations too that serve the community. But we were, I think, the first, and they hired some people to be there, and they gave us a multi-year lease and so on and so forth. And that's great. But at some point I said to this guy, why are you so nice to us? Why have you been so generous to us?
You're a suspicious New Yorker.
Yeah. But we'd become friends. And he said, well, my partners are all Christians. And he said, and I sent them your website. And
Wow. And
they were like,
surprised.
yeah, and they were like, these are great people. We want to make this happen if we can.
Wow.
And so we pay for the space, but we pay a fraction over what any of the churches would have given us. We get 10x more. And we have a good relationship with them. And this gentleman ended up coming to a city-to-city event in the spring. And so, there's conversations going on there. But I ended up meeting his partners.
Wow.
Or one of them. And she said, we've been praying that our portfolio would be used for the kingdom of God.
Wow.
For years.
Wow.
And so here I am, like,
For
should I
years.
plant? Should I not plant? Should I look at this? It's just like God's like, come on. Come on.
So, David, as we try to close our time here, we want to just ask you to let us in as you pray for God's kingdom to come in Chelsea and in New York City. What does that look like in your mind's eye?
Yeah, I think even though we're there trying to be good neighbors, I still I don't have the kinds of relationships with the people in my own building that I would love to have. And so I think the prayer for me would be that would be true. Like, I live in a building, I think there's 52 units in there, and I believe 45 of them are gay men or women. And so to have real relationships with people who have loved us for a long time, but in passing, and for them to see neighbor as their space, if we could do that, then that's as like authentic as you can be.
Yeah.
I think it's easy to do ministry and just walk past the people who are right under your nose, right? And we all have that
Jesus
feeling.
had a parable about that.
Yes. So as I think about that, I want to think small. Obviously, there's things that are going to happen that are outside of my control that can lead to bigger things. But I want to be relationally very intentional. Yeah.
Wow.
And disciple people to do that.
I mean, what a picture you've painted for us of the kingdom of God coming to Chelsea, looking like neighbors, really being neighbors, and relationships happening that are authentic and real. We're no longer passing each other by. We're actually stopping to know each other.
And bringing it back to we miss them too.
Yes. Yes.
Have you guys seen the movie Slim and Queen? Queen and Slim?
I think I did.
This movie is it's kind of like a modern day Bonnie and Clyde movie. And in the movie, this young black couple, they meet each other, first date, kind of like online. They met and they have a date, and on the way home, it's a nice date. But they're not necessarily sold on each other. On the way home, they're stopped by the police, and all hell breaks loose. And they're on the run, and they're innocent. But then, the media says they're dangerous, but they're finding all of these safe havens as they're trying to get to safety.
Yeah.
And in the midst of all that, they're talking about meaningful things in their life, in the car and as they're wherever they are. And they start asking what they're looking for in their significant other. And she shares, and then she asks him what he's looking for. And he says, I'm not going to bend the world. And he's this like working class guy. He says, I'm not going to bend the world. My wife will be my legacy. So in all of that, he's saying, how I treat her, how I care for her will be the most important thing in my life. And she'll tell my story. And I think obviously that's true in marriage. I think that's true for us as planters. We have big dreams. But it's the relationships that will really tell the story.
Yeah.
And so I can get really carried away dreaming about what can happen. But I think it's the people that you interact with. They're going to tell my story. I don't get to do that really. So,
wow. Yeah. I mean, for folks that'll be listening and may not see the visual, I'm having a hard time holding back the emotions as I'm seeing just the passion in your soul emanate for a neighborhood that sounds so incredibly beautiful and broken. And in the midst of all of that, God has you and many other believers and many other churches there trying to serve and love. We can't thank you enough for spending time with us today and sharing your heart and letting us hear this incredible story of God leading you, the surprises, him waiting for you guys to just, as you put it, just to be faithful and this really simple yet profound articulation of what it could look like to see churches planted in our city and beyond. Just let's be good neighbors and let's go from there.
Yeah.
So
thank
you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Thank you for listening to Gospel Legacy in New York City, a podcast brought to you by City to City, New York City. As we conclude today's episode, we've explored the Chelsea neighborhood with David Plant, church planter and pastor of Storefront Church. From its industrial roots in the 19th century to today's attractions like Chelsea Market, Chelsea Piers, and the High Line, David has shared what makes this thriving neighborhood truly special. Because of time constraints, one of the questions that didn't make it into this episode asked David, if Storefront Church had a playlist, what are the first few songs? Be sure to check out our show notes for the answer. I think you may find it refreshing and reflective of your own experience as a burgeoning church planter. For additional resources from this episode, check out our show notes below and visit our podcast website, www.gospellegacynyc.com.
Be sure to tune in next time as we continue exploring the impact of the gospel in New York City, hearing from more pastors and leaders who are shaping communities to be salt and light here. You don't want to miss it. If you've enjoyed this podcast, don't forget to subscribe and share it with a friend. For more information and to stay connected with our community, please visit us at www.citytocity.nyc. Until next time, we pray that God's church will faithfully reflect the beauty of the gospel in every corner of New York City and wherever you are as well.